Mic check, 1 2 1 2.
We're back.
What's up, Barbies?
What's up?
Welcome
back.
to What's up, y'all? I'm Destiny.
And Zainab.
Welcome to the very first episode of the Black Political Barbies podcast.
Another banger. Make a call, make a bong, 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 make a call, make a key, fatty, bong, 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 your body, kakara, make a bong, 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 on a make it.
I am a former political appointee in the Biden-Harris administration. Yes, I worked inside the federal government, and yes, I have tea to spill.
I'm also a former political appointee, and we got the front row seat on what it's like to work in the federal government. When Trump came in, let's just say we had to resign fast.
Very fast. Basically, when you are a political appointee, you are appointed by the president of the United States to work for the federal government. And when a new president comes in, all political appointees basically have to resign, and we are essentially replaced by new political appointees under the new administration. It's really not personal, it's just how the system works. But trust me, this recent transition, it was not it. It
So
was
we're
not
taking
it.
what we've learned from working inside the government and bringing it to you all. We'll spill all the teas and actually give clock it exactly, and actually give you the news in a way that makes sense to Gen Z. So we'll break it down how it will affect your day to day, and give you inside scoop on how the government really actually works. Because I feel like a lot of us who came from, like you said, Destiny, underserved, underprivileged background. For example, for me, I'm an immigrant, first generation. We don't really know how federal government really works. So we'll spill all the tea at once, but also give you the news and break it down on what's happening in Washington, D.C.
Period. And while we doing that, baby, we're going to keep it real, funny, and very messy.
Oh, very much messy.
Very much messy when necessary. Because if we can't laugh through all this chaos, then
what's the point of making
what's the
podcast?
point?
Exactly.
What is the point?
Exactly.
So we're here.
Yeah.
So what can they expect from future episodes?
Like we said, we'll break down all the news that's happening in the federal government. We'll talk about our stories and how we actually got to where we are, and really talk about what's happening in this current administration, right?
Yep.
We're gonna break down some of the executive orders, right, that have been coming out. I feel like it feels like 2 years, but it's only been a month and a half. All the chaos is that's coming down here from the current administration, but really talk about our experiences, how we got to where we are, and really spill some of the craziest stories that we've had on what it's like to work inside the federal government. Especially for me, I've worked in agency, but also in the White House, and then you did the campaign and 2 agencies, and really some of the scandals and some of the moments. There are moments that we both wait, how do I end up here? So we'll break those down. We'll give you all the tea. There are funny moments, some crazy moments, some moments that we cried, and you're like, why am I here? Why did I sign up this? So we'll cover all of them.
Definitely covering the good, the bad, and how did we even get in this room moment. Exactly. So basically on our next episode, we're going to talk about how we got in the Biden-Harris administration, because we were not just Olivia Pope. There was just no walking through the front doors of the White House. This was a process. We're just very passionate about informing and educating people on politics and policies that are going to affect them. But not only that, but I feel like we're Gen Z, and we are responsible for being the change that we hope to see in the government. We are responsible for making government actually work for us and for our kind. So yeah, we are diving into all of the executive orders, all of the craziness, the chaos, honestly, yeah. So immediately on my social media, when I started posting my job and going to the White House and all of these cool experiences that being a political appointee brought to me, everyone would always ask me, how did I get this job? What did I major in college? So just a little backstory. I am a campaign girl turned political appointee. I graduated from college back in 2020. And immediately after college, my internship kind of built the bridge in order for me to work on the Biden-Harris campaign, the presidential campaign in 2020. Right after we won that, literally, y'all, campaigns are like, you just have like this different type of energy. It's always like go, go, go. And campaigns are really powerful. You just become very connected to like a network. So long story short, after we won the Biden Harris 2020 presidential campaign, I literally packed up my car 2 days later, drove 7 hours to Atlanta, Georgia, and I worked for Warnock and Ossoff on the recount race. And long story short, somewhere along the lines, I dropped my resume in the presidential personnel office, and I was contacted to begin the interview process to become a day one appointee in the administration. Recently graduated from college, and not even sure if I mentioned, but I was a first generation college student. So just learning how to navigate life after college and transitioning into my first ever big girl job. It was just very much a journey. And I'm sure Zainab had a similar, if not very
Yeah,
similar.
I would say my background, I never thought I was going to be in politics. I knew that I was passionate about advocacy. I knew that I wanted to, be the voice for underserved communities, communities that didn't have a voice when it comes to policy. My background, I thought I was going to be a doctor, honestly. I did, pre-med in undergrad, and then later on down the line, I was kind of tired about the health disparities and health inequities that was happening in my community. Graduated from undergrad, packed my bags, told my mom that I was going to move to DC to pursue masters in public health and health policy, and she was like, "What is that?" Moved to DC, was working on the Hill as an intern for my home state senator, and then later became a fellow. And down the line, obviously, if you're in DC, for folks who know, a lot of times they tell you to network, and we'll touch on what that even means. And this is kind of how we got our jobs, honestly, is networking and meeting people. And that's kind of how I landed in the White House, is through networking, through talking to people, sending my resume blindly, emails. Honestly, ended up in the White House. Was there about a year and a half, and then transitioned into an agency. But I was in the office of presidential personnel. What Destiny just mentioned. We'll talk about sort of how they do the hiring process, and sort of the difference between political and how if you're a political appointee, a lot of times you don't get to apply Indeed, or you don't. There's no such thing as applying online. It's all about knowing someone. It's all about having that connection, and honestly being places at the right time. I'll say that too.
Yeah. So what is a political appointee? What does it mean? How is it different from those jobs that you can apply for on
Mm-hmm.
usajobs.gov or Indeed or whatever other websites exist out there? So basically, a political appointee, we are appointed directly by the president. We work at the pleasure of the president
Mm-hmm.
and not the federal government. And very different from career
Yes.
civil servant. So when basically being appointed by the president, when the president leaves, we
Mm-hmm.
resign, we are replaced by the new administration, and the people who apply for their jobs under usajobs.gov, or they are just career civil servants who love advocacy work, or just are looking for, just kind of like a standard, just kind of
Yeah.
like a very standard job where you can retire after 20 years, and they work at the pleasure of the government, no matter who is the president, no matter who takes control of the White House. They are there to work
Finish their
and,
jobs,
yeah, and kind of
essentially.
push forward whatever the new president
Yeah.
says.
And there's about, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Destiny, but there's about 5,000 or so political appointees
4,000
across 4,000, sorry, around 4,000 across the federal government. So you're looking at 4,000 people being out of job in
every
every
4 years.
4 years. So that
Yeah.
really goes to show you how important those people are. And a lot of times, those political appointees are in on a senior level position that work within the office of the head of the agency. So if you work in the Department of Health and Human Services, where we were at, and labor, a lot of the political appointees work within that office. They're direct report to the secretary, to the leader of the agency. And obviously the White House is a little bit different, where everyone that works in that building, the Eisenhower building, which I'm sure you guys all seen, and Scandal and the West Wing. That's not. We'll touch on that, but that's not how it feels like a lot of times when we were starting on our career as a public servant, that's what we thought. We thought, working in the federal government was like Olivia Pope walking into the Oval Office. That's not how it works. That's not the reality. And I don't think a lot of people that work in the Eisenhower building don't really get to walk unless you're actually work in the West Wing, which is a little bit different there. But I'm curious to know, Destiny, like, what was there things that you've learned that if let's just say you want to go back to the administration 4 years from now, was there something that you've learned from like being in the first admin, like maybe I don't know, because I feel like personally, like I there was a lot of things that I didn't know, and also like the thing about working in the federal government is like there's no such thing as training. There's no like they don't give you a handbook of like, oh, here's your first day, like here's training material. You don't get that. You just have to figure out yourself. But I'm curious to know, like, some of the challenges that you've had when you first started, especially working in two different agencies.
Yeah, I'll definitely say being a not only a first generation college student, but also being a kind of first generation child to kind
Mm.
of like have to figure it out. So when me and my family first heard about, the White House, I got this email from the White House personnel office, and they're
Mhm.
like, we want to begin the first round interview. I truly feel like my parents and everybody around me immediately thought, oh my gosh, like you're gonna move to DC. We went on Glassdoor. It said confidential assistants made like six figures. So I immediately thought, like, my parents were
Crazy.
so proud. They
Yeah.
thought I was gonna be moving to DC, making six figures. I was gonna be well off the year after.
Yeah.
That is not what happened. So what did I learn first? Taking these sort of jobs, you truly have to be
Second.
passionate about what you're doing. You have to be passionate about
Mhm.
just, being a part of the fight for justice and for advancing health equity and different,
Mhm.
just advancing social justice in America. I feel like you
That's
truly
true.
have to have a calling to do this work. You have to
Yeah.
be passionate because you're
Yeah.
definitely not doing it for the money.
Nope.
My first job in the administration, I literally made $49,157 living in Washington, D.C. That breaks down to about $1,300 every 2 weeks. Babe, the rent in DC is minimum $2,000
Yeah.
a month for a studio apartment.
Mine. Yeah.
So
Crazy.
that is the first thing that I learned. You can't take these jobs if you're not passionate about it
Yeah.
because you're definitely not taking the jobs for the money.
Mhm.
I learned that in these sort of rooms that I walk in, while I may not be I may not be the last one of my kind to walk into these type of rooms, but I am very few of my kind to walk in these type of rooms, to have a seat at the table.
Mhm.
A lot of these times I walk into the room, I was the youngest, I was the only black one. And a lot of conversations I had with people like very early on in my career, they would always say things like, oh, it's very rare for people like you, or like it's very rare for someone your age. And it just makes you kind of feel like you kind of like don't belong in a way.
Also, the
Um,
imposter syndrome too. I feel like knowing that, do I belong in these rooms? Like, what am
yeah,
I
and
doing
and
here?
really trying to figure out your voice and your
Mhm.
brand and
Right.
what you want to do and what you want to focus on. I
Right.
feel like
Right.
it was definitely kind of like a struggle trying to figure out,
Yeah.
you know, like who am I? Like why am I here? Like
Yeah.
why was I placed here? And
Exactly.
it definitely took me about, I would say it took me my first 2.5 years in DC to like really get my feet on the ground, and like really figure out what I was put here to do and like why I'm here and like what am I really passionate about.
Yeah, I think for me, I also had a similar experience where, I remember, like you said, my parents, being the first daughter of immigrant parents and like being first generation, being black, what have you, being Muslim, like there's so many identities. And I feel like I didn't see someone that looked like me on the halls of, Eisenhower, on the halls of, HHS where we were at later on. But like I didn't see someone that looked like me. So it was really hard, I think, navigating those spaces and going to meetings and seeing being the only black Muslim in the room, right? A lot of times I think I definitely felt the imposter syndrome where I'm like, okay, why am I here? Like, do
Yeah.
I doubted myself a lot of times because I'm like, okay, am I supposed to be in these rooms? And then in my head, I'm like, yes, you deserve to be here. You
Yeah.
deserve to be here. You worked hard for it. Like, yes, there are people that mentor you. There are people that got you where you are. But then that you worked hard. You put on the time. So I kept telling myself over and over again that you belong there. And I feel like as a young, we got into political early on in our career. Like we doubted ourselves. We're like, okay, what am I doing here? So I
Yeah.
think knowing that you belong there is so crucial. Like keep telling yourself that you belong there. You deserve to be there was I think definitely the hardest part for me at least navigating working in the White House and later on HHS. But also the pressure. I feel like a lot of times, like being very young, like they expect you to be perfect. Like you
And not even just being young, but being black.
exactly
Like there is
right,
always, no matter if you're in
right,
politics, in private sector, in
yeah,
nonprofit, in America, there is definitely a silent expectation. If not only are we black, but we're black women.
right,
Like
right,
Zainab said, she comes from a background where she came from a two immigrant household, a
mm-hmm.
two immigrant parent household, and I come from a household of two black Americans. I am a first generation college student. There is
Yeah,
always going to be an expectation to be twice as good. And I
yeah,
definitely feel like, not sure about you, but I definitely feel like I experienced that so much working inside federal government when it came down to like getting more money or like putting
mm-hmm.
yourself up for a promotion. I learned that not only do
Yeah,
you have to be twice as good as a black woman, but you, if no one else, you have to learn how to
and
advocate for
exactly,
yourself.
exactly,
Like being in these sort of rooms, like everyone first doubts you. No one feels like you should be here. Everyone questions your means, or everyone questions really like what you're capable of and your capabilities and your work ethics. And just learning how to be twice as good, not saying that there was just like a lot of pressure not to like really make mistakes and have everything perfect, and just like, oh my gosh, if I fuck up, like these people already don't want me in the room. Like it's so sad, because it really shouldn't be that way. Like I
mm-hmm.
just feel like life is already hard enough, one being black, two being a woman, but damn, like
Idea that you have to look like you were saying, you have to look. I mean, obviously, in politics, you have to dress professionally, but like knowing that you have to look a certain way, certain image, right, and kind of be this different person when you come to
yeah,
work because you already know that they think that you don't belong there. So I think that has definitely been for us, some of the hardest part of navigating these spaces as an early, as a young folks. But I'm curious to know, Destiny, like let's talk maybe a little bit about the transition and what that really means and how that actually works. 'Cause I feel like a lot of people don't
yeah,
know what happens when like a president wins on November. Like I'm curious to know what was that experience for you, especially if you were at labor where we went to different agencies later on. But like
yeah,
what was because I feel like we had different experience in a way, but the same. Yeah.
yeah. Girl, I feel like the transition. So I remember being so hyped, right? Like we had Kamala on the ballot. We had the first black woman to ever even make it to the ballot. It just gave us,
Yeah.
like as a young black woman, I feel like it gave us so much hope.
Hope.
I feel like everyone had so much like high energy, and maybe I feel like I've learned a lot that being in DC and being in the DC political bubble is definitely real. I feel like
Mm-hmm.
we are very shut off from what the rest of the world sees or
Yeah.
like how the rest of the world feels. So I remember on November 5th, first off, the week before that, I had literally just gotten an offer to start a new job. So I literally started a new job at the Department of Labor the day before Election Day. On Election Day, I remember being so hopeful, so happy. I knew that we were going to win. I was just like, there's no fucking way that people are literally going to vote for Donald Trump again. They saw
Right.
what the fuck happened
Exactly.
in 2016 when they voted for him. There's no way that they're going to vote for
Yeah.
him again. So I hosted a watch night party. You were there.
Yeah.
I remember the energy, starting off high. Everyone had
Mhm.
drinks. We had food. We were so happy. We just knew that we were going
Yeah.
to fucking win. And around 10 o'clock that night when people started dipping out, I feel like we kind of knew before we went to bed. Like, I don't
Yeah.
know. I just remember going to sleep that night, very, very sad, but also a little bit of hope left. And I feel like I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I saw that all of the news outlets had kind of projected Donald Trump to be the winner. And I just remember feeling so, I just felt empty. I felt so sad. I literally stayed in my room for 3 days straight. I didn't let any light in. I barely ate anything. I maybe drank one bottle of water within those 3 days. And I don't know, like I was just shocked. I'm like, how the fuck could people truly,
Yeah.
like, y'all really voted for this man again? And it was so scary this time around because I wasn't in college. Like, this is my job. Like, I work for this administration. It was kind of scary. I was scared. I was nervous. I was anxious. I was lost. I took time to kind of, feel my feelings. And then I think, the next day we all hopped on these work calls and it was kind of reality. And we just started talking about transitions and what that looked like.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know. We started talking about the day that we had to put in our resignation letters. We had to write our letter of resignation. We had to turn in all of our equipment. We all have to find new jobs, and that's over 4,000 people in DC who now have to find
Jobs.
new jobs and figure out what they're going to do next, because now not only did we lose the presidential race, but we lost the House, we lost the Senate. So now there's a lower demand for Democrats in the city.
Yeah.
It was just very scary learning how to navigate this, and especially being young and being a first in these type of rooms.
Yeah.
It's still kind of scary.
Yeah, I was gonna add to what you just said, how a lot of these, when transition happens, like, it's not like the human resources, the HR department at our agency will say, "Hey, you're fired." Like, it's just the reality of being political appointee is that
Yeah.
when a president loses the election, everybody has to go. All the 4,000 political appointees have to go. So that's kind of reality. It's not like,
Yeah.
and I feel like a lot of times, like, I got a lot of questions from my parents, especially. They're like, "Why do you have to leave? Can you stay?"
Yes.
Like, literally, my mom's like, my parents said, "Can you stay?" I'm like, "Mom, that's not how it works. It's a political act. You signed up for this. You signed up to be a political appointee." And honestly, even if it was not the case, even if we were a civil servant, I don't think I would have stayed. Honestly,
Think?
like, I don't think I would. No, I don't
Girl,
think.
fuck
No,
no.
I don't think I would stay.
Fuck
Let's just say
no.
that.
Fuck
But
no.
like, that is the reality of like being political appointee. Is like, you go with the president. So if the president, wins another term, then you stay with the president.
If he
So
doesn't,
if he doesn't, then we
you
all
resign and
go.
you're
We
replaced.
exactly. So like, that's just a reality, and I feel like I kind of sometimes don't understand why some of the career staff and career civil servants stay. And like, I feel like the Republican Party has changed, and we will talk about it in future episodes, and how, like, when you look at Bush administration, that is different than the current Republican Party, right?
Girl, any Republican Party is different
It is
from
different, but I feel like
they're no longer the Republican Party. They're like the MAGA
but
party.
I feel like nowadays Republican Party are extremists. It's not something we've ever seen though. Like, I don't think
Yeah.
this is extremism. This is something that we've never seen before.
Yeah.
They're fascism, I would say.
Transitions are hard.
Yeah, they are.
Especially this just being our first transition, our first job out of college.
Yeah.
Both of us just being very passionate. So a lot of people are just like, so what do y'all do now? Like, what is next? So I'm just curious to know, like, aside from hosting this podcast, what does the next chapter of your life look like? And what do you hope that you just continue to do in your next chapter?
That's a really good question, and I think that's the question that I get from my mom every day. She was like, "So, when are you getting a new job?" Literally almost every day. My dad calls me every other day and he's like, "So, have you found a job?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm working on it, Dad, because it's not that easy." People don't realize how hard it is to like find a job. Thankfully, like, like we were saying, like we got our job through network and people knowing someone, and we didn't have to apply jobs.
Yeah.
So like now going back to reality and having to like go to Google, Indeed, and like actually like LinkedIn, to it's hard. Like I know we know what it feels like to not have a job and to kind of go through the job market, especially right now. The job market's not looking great because there's over, like we said, over 4,000 people that are looking jobs. So it's not really, it's competitive. Um, but for me, at least, I mean, I want to do the work that I'm doing, the work that I've been doing, which is health equity, which is something that I'm passionate about. Be civic engaged, you know, as much as I can. I think really educating, especially underserved communities of color, immigrant communities, about the importance of being politically engaged, especially now what we've seen is happening in the federal government, right? We've worked, like I said, we've worked from the inside. We know what how this is going to affect day-to-day people, you know, your regular middle class Americans that are working 9 to 5, that can barely afford food or groceries. So really try to be politically engaged, try to do as much as I can to engage communities, especially the communities that we came from. But for me, I think what's next is kind of trying to do health equity work. I ultimately kind of also want to go back into state government, and really, because I know when it comes to health equity, when it comes to health disparity, states have a lot of power in ensuring that communities are getting the resources they can to close those gaps. So ultimately, I think for me to do state government work, but maybe hopefully when we win in 2028, come back and work for the government again. We'll see. I don't know. I feel like a lot is going to change in our lives in the next 4 years, personally and professionally
Honey,
too.
not
So
even only that, but the Democrats got to figure out how to get back in the game. You talking about
exactly.
2028? Honey, we have
Actually,
to figure out how to get back in the game with all this
2026,
stuff that
the house is up for re-election 2026.
no, not even the House, the presidential. Who's going to run for president?
That
How are
true.
we
That
going to
true.
reach
That's true.
America that we couldn't reach in 2020? We had over 15 million people who did not even
Vote.
get out and
The
vote.
vote.
So, like, where did we mess up? Who's going to run for president? What does the Democratic Party even stand for anymore? Like, what does it even mean to
Yeah,
be a
a Democrat.
Democrat?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But that's tea for another
It
episode
really is.
for sure.
Clock that.
Um, for me, I feel
Yeah.
like just continuing to mobilize and educate Gen Z people. I feel
Yeah.
like maybe going to work for a member on the Hill, just
Yeah.
still definitely being involved in some sort of government work, protecting democracy, and truly trying to be a part of the team that figures out what is
Mm.
next for the Democratic Party. I feel like it's deeper than surface level to just,
It really is, yeah.
I don't know, like this shit is deep, and I want to be, I feel like part of where the Democrats went wrong is like
Yeah.
I just feel like I want to be part of the team that builds out the communications and that builds out the messaging for the party and advances the messaging and the mission to just
Yeah.
further connect with everyday Americans.
Yeah, and I think in terms of, just want to touch on the communication piece, like I think we've done so much great work in the Biden Harris administration, and I feel like the Democrats have like lacked on how do we communicate what we've done to the American people. So like working on like strategic comms and like really figuring out like how do you actually educate, but also like how do you let the American people know that we've done great work, and I feel like they lack on that. But that's for another episode, and I feel like we have a lot that we can say on there as
Yeah.
well. But there's a lot more than that. You know, comms is a big thing, but also there's a lot more other issues that they have that they lacked, especially in the last election cycle. But this, yeah,
Until then, until we figure out
until
what's next, we'll just
yeah,
continue to host this podcast.
yes,
We have nothing but time being unemployed.
yes,
So we'll just continue to host this podcast and continue to reply back to our parents. No, we don't have a job yet, Dad, or we don't have a
have a
job
job
yet,
yet, mom.
Mom. Like, relax.
We'll get there
Um,
hopefully one day. So
one day.
one day,
But until then, we'll continue
yeah.
to be the host of
Oh,
Black Political Barbies.
please.
Thank y'all for tuning in to this episode. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, drop us some hearts and comments. We'd
Yes.
love to hear from y'all on what y'all want to hear from us. What should we focus on? What should we cover?
Yeah.
Anything like that. What guests should we have on the show? Um, but until then,
Yep. Follow us on social media as Black Political Barbies Podcast. Listen to our podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. So that's Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Until next time, thank you guys for watching and stay politically engaged. Stay, what was our saying?
Stay political, stay powerful. Stay political, stay powerful, and
okay, go ahead.
until next time, stay political,
stay powerful,
and stay bad. That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.